Let me ask you a question. If someone from another country asked you about your hometown, what would you say? Would you know how to describe it in English? Would you know how to talk about the people, the food, the atmosphere, and the places that make it special? For many English learners, that's actually a difficult question. Not because they don't love their hometown, but because they don't know how to talk about it naturally in English. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today.
I love this topic because everyone has a hometown. No matter where you live now, there's usually a place that feels like home, a place connected to your childhood memories, your family, your friends, and some of the most important moments in your life. When people ask us about our hometown, they're not just asking about a location on a map. They're asking about a part of who we are.
That's so true. And what's interesting is that two people can grow up in completely different places, yet still feel the same emotional connection. One person might come from a huge city, another might come from a small village. One might grow up near the ocean, another might grow up surrounded by mountains. But when they talk about home, there's often a similar feeling, a sense of familiarity, comfort, and belonging.
Exactly. When I think about my hometown, the first thing that comes to mind isn't a building or a street, it's a feeling. It's the feeling of walking through places I know so well that I could find my way with my eyes closed. It's seeing familiar faces. It's remembering childhood experiences. And even though many things have changed over the years, that feeling remains the same.
I can definitely relate to that. And I think many listeners probably feel the same way. No matter how far we travel, there's something special about the place where our story began. Even if we don't live there anymore, even if it has changed, a hometown often becomes part of our identity.
Absolutely. And if someone asked me to describe my hometown, I'd probably start by talking about its size, because that's one of the easiest ways to begin. For example, you can say, my hometown is a small town, or my hometown is a large city, or even, my hometown is a quiet place surrounded by nature. These simple descriptions help people immediately imagine what the place is like.
That's a great point. And after describing the size, you can talk about the atmosphere. For example, my hometown is peaceful and friendly. Or, it's busy and energetic. Or, it's a beautiful place with lots of parks and green spaces. The goal isn't to use complicated English. The goal is simply to paint a picture in someone's mind.
Exactly. And sometimes the most memorable things about a hometown aren't the famous attractions, they're the little details. The bakery you visited as a child, the park where you played with friends, the street where your grandparents lived, the local market, the smell of food in the evening. Those small memories often mean more than any tourist attraction.
I completely agree. In fact, when people talk about their hometown with emotion, listeners become interested because they're not just hearing facts, they're hearing stories. And stories are what make conversations memorable. That's why whenever someone asks me about my hometown, I try to share a personal memory, something that helps people understand what the place means to me.
That's excellent advice. Because language isn't only about information, it's about connection. And hometowns are perfect conversation topics because everyone has experiences they can share. Everyone has memories. Everyone has stories.
So here's a question for everyone listening today. If someone asked you, tell me about your hometown, what would you say? Would you talk about the people, the food, the weather, the culture, or maybe the memories that make it special? Take a moment to think about it. Because in the next part, we're going to explore some of the most memorable things people love about their hometowns and learn how to describe them naturally in English. Earlier, we talked about how a hometown is more than just a place on a map. It's a collection of memories, experiences, and emotions. But if someone asked you what makes your hometown special, what would you say? That's actually a question I find very interesting because every person notices different things. Some people immediately talk about the food, others talk about the people, and some people talk about the atmosphere. What about you? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about the best part of your hometown?
For me, it's definitely the people. I've always believed that people create the personality of a place. You can have beautiful buildings and famous attractions, but if the people aren't friendly, something feels missing. One thing I love about my hometown is how welcoming people are. When you walk down the street, it's common to see neighbors greeting each other. People stop and have conversations. They ask how you're doing. They remember your name. And even though life has become busier over the years, that sense of community still exists. I think that's something very special.
I completely understand what you mean. In many large cities, people are constantly rushing from one place to another. Everyone seems busy. Everyone seems focused on their own schedule. But in smaller communities, there's often a stronger sense of connection. People know each other, families know each other, and that creates a feeling of belonging. I think that's one reason many people feel nostalgic when they think about their hometown. They remember a time when life felt simpler.
That's true. And speaking of nostalgia, another thing I love about my hometown is the food. Every place has its own local dishes and traditions. And somehow, food has a way of bringing back memories instantly. You can move to another city. You can travel to another country. But then you taste a dish from your hometown, and suddenly you're reminded of childhood, family gatherings, celebrations, weekends with friends. It's amazing how powerful those memories can be.
I agree. Food is often one of the strongest connections we have to home, and it's also one of the easiest ways to talk about your hometown in English. For example, you can say, my hometown is famous for its street food. Or, there are many traditional dishes that people enjoy. Or, the local food is one of the best things about living there. These simple descriptions help create a vivid picture for the listener.
Absolutely. And beyond the food and the people, I think every hometown has certain places that become meaningful over time. Maybe it's a park, maybe it's a river, maybe it's a beach, or maybe it's just a small cafe where people like to spend time. When I think about my hometown, there are certain places that immediately come to mind. Not because they're famous, but because they're connected to important memories. That's what makes them special.
That's a great point. Sometimes tourists visit a place and focus on the major attractions, but local residents often have completely different favorites. They remember places connected to everyday life, the school they attended, the street where they learned to ride a bicycle, the park where they met friends after school. Those places may seem ordinary to others, but they carry personal meaning.
Exactly. And I think that's something people should remember when describing their hometown. You don't need to talk about famous landmarks. You don't need to sound like a travel guide. You can simply talk about the places that matter to you. Those personal details often make conversations much more interesting.
Another thing I appreciate about hometowns is the sense of identity they give us. Whether we realize it or not, the place where we grow up influences who we become. It shapes our habits, our values, the way we see the world. Even after moving away, many of those influences stay with us. That's why people often feel proud when talking about where they come from.
I think that's very true. And it's also why people enjoy hearing about other people's hometowns. Every hometown has its own culture, its own traditions, its own unique character. When we listen to someone describe where they grew up, we're learning something about them as a person. We're learning about their experiences and the environment that shaped them.
So let's imagine someone asks you, what do you like most about your hometown? You could answer in many different ways. Maybe you'd talk about the friendly people. Maybe you'd talk about the delicious food. Maybe you'd talk about the beautiful scenery. Or maybe you'd talk about the memories you've created there. There's no single correct answer because every hometown is special for different reasons.
And that's what makes this topic so enjoyable. No two answers are exactly the same. Everyone has their own story, everyone has their own perspective, and everyone has something unique to share.
Before we continue, let's ask our listeners a question. What do you love most about your hometown? Is it the people, the food, the nature, the culture, or maybe something completely different? Think about your answer. Because in the next part, we're going to talk about how hometowns change over time and how it feels when you return to a place that looks familiar but somehow feels different from the one you remember. There's something I've always found fascinating about hometowns. No matter how long we stay away, we often imagine that everything remains exactly the same streets, the same buildings, the same people, the same atmosphere. But then one day, we return, and we realize that time has been moving forward even while we were gone. Some places look completely different. New buildings have appeared, old businesses have disappeared, roads have been expanded, neighborhoods have changed. And suddenly, we find ourselves standing in a place that feels both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time.
I know exactly what you mean. I remember visiting my hometown after being away for several years. Before the trip, I had a very clear picture in my mind. I thought everything would look exactly the way I remembered it. But when I arrived, I was surprised. Some of my favorite places were gone. The small shop I used to visit as a child had closed. A large building now stood where an empty field once existed. Even some of the streets looked different. At first, it felt strange, almost as if I had traveled to a different place. But then I realized something important. The hometown wasn't the only thing that had changed. I had changed too.
That's such an interesting realization. Because sometimes we focus so much on how a place has changed that we forget we've been changing as well. The person who left years ago isn't exactly the same person returning today. We've gained new experiences. We've met new people, we've learned new things, our perspectives have evolved. So it's natural that we see familiar places differently. In many ways, revisiting a hometown is like opening an old photo album. The pictures haven't changed, but the person looking at them has.
That's a beautiful comparison, and I think that's why returning home can feel emotional. It's not just about seeing a place, it's about reconnecting with memories. Sometimes I'll walk down a street and suddenly remember something that happened years ago, a conversation, a friendship, a moment I hadn't thought about in a long time. It's amazing how places can hold memories. Even after many years, certain locations seem to bring them back instantly.
I completely agree. And I think everyone has at least one place like that. Maybe it's a school, maybe it's a park, maybe it's a family home, or maybe it's just a street where something important happened. Those places become connected to our personal history. That's why they continue to mean something to us long after we've left. They're not just locations, they're chapters of our lives.
Exactly. And even when a hometown changes, some things often remain the same. For example, I noticed that while many buildings had changed, the feeling of the community was still there. People were still friendly. Families still gathered together. Local traditions still existed. The town had grown and modernized, but it hadn't lost its identity. And I think that's what mattered most to me.
That's a great point, because change isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes we feel nostalgic and wish everything could stay exactly as it was. But growth is a natural part of life. Cities grow, communities develop, new opportunities appear. In many cases, those changes improve people's lives. The challenge is learning to appreciate both the past and the present at the same time.
I think that's true not only for places, but also for people. Sometimes we look back at our childhood and remember only the good parts. We remember simpler times, less responsibility, more freedom. But every stage of life has something valuable to offer. The goal isn't to live in the past. The goal is to appreciate the past while continuing to move forward.
I love that perspective. And honestly, I think that's one reason hometowns are so meaningful. They remind us where we came from, they remind us how far we've traveled, and they remind us that growth is possible. When we see how much a place has changed, we often realize how much we've changed too.
Absolutely. And perhaps that's one of the greatest gifts a hometown can give us: perspective. It allows us to look back and see our journey more clearly, the dreams we once had, the challenges we faced, the person we used to be, and the person we're becoming.
Before we continue, let's ask our listeners something. When was the last time you visited your hometown? And if you haven't been back in a long time, what do you think would surprise you the most? Would it be the new buildings, the people, the atmosphere, or maybe the realization that you've changed more than you expected?
Take a moment to think about that, because in the next part, we're going to talk about something many people experience when they leave home: missing their hometown. Why do we sometimes feel homesick? What do we miss the most? And why do certain places stay in our hearts no matter where life takes us? Let's talk about that next.
After talking about hometowns and memories, I think there's another feeling many people can relate to: homesickness. It's a word that sounds simple, but it's actually a very emotional experience. Most people experience it at some point in their lives. Maybe when they move to a new city, maybe when they study abroad, maybe when they start a new job far from home, or maybe when they travel for a long period of time. At first, everything feels exciting. There are new places to explore, new people to meet, new experiences waiting around every corner. But then, usually when you least expect it, something reminds you of home, and suddenly, you miss it.
That's so true. I remember the first time I spent a long period away from my hometown. At the beginning, I was focused on all the exciting things happening around me. Everything felt new and interesting. I was busy adapting to a different environment. But after a few weeks, I started noticing little things. I missed familiar faces. I missed hearing certain voices. I missed my favorite local food. And surprisingly, I even missed things I used to complain about. Things that had always seemed ordinary suddenly became important.
I think that's one of the strange things about being away from home. We often don't realize how much something means to us until it's no longer part of our daily life. When we're at home, we take many things for granted: the people around us, the places we visit, the routines we follow. But once they're gone, we begin to appreciate them in a completely different way. Sometimes all it takes is a familiar smell, a song, or a photograph to bring back a flood of memories.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that homesickness isn't always about the physical place itself. Sometimes it's about the feeling associated with that place, the feeling of comfort, the feeling of belonging, the feeling of knowing exactly where you fit. When we're in a new environment, everything requires effort. We have to learn new routines, meet new people, adjust to different expectations. Home, on the other hand, often feels effortless. It's familiar, it's comfortable, it's a place where we can relax and simply be ourselves.
I completely agree, and I think that's why so many people become emotional when talking about home. Because home represents more than geography, it represents connection, family, friendship, memories, and a sense of identity. Even people who have built wonderful lives elsewhere often carry a piece of their hometown with them, no matter how far they travel, no matter how many years pass.
That's definitely true for me. There are certain things that instantly remind me of home. For example, certain foods. Whenever I taste them, memories come rushing back. I remember family dinners, conversations around the table, special occasions, even simple moments that didn't seem important at the time. It's amazing how powerful those memories can be.
Food really does have that effect. But for me, It's often music. Sometimes I'll hear a song that was popular when I was younger, and suddenly I remember a specific time in my life, a specific place, a specific feeling. It's almost like traveling through time. And I think that's one reason hometown memories remain so strong. They're connected to some of our earliest experiences.
Exactly. And as we get older, we often realize that what we miss most isn't necessarily the place itself. It's the people, the conversations, the relationships, the moments we shared. Because places can change, buildings can change, cities can change, but the memories we create with people often stay with us forever.
That's such an important point. I think many people assume they're homesick because they miss a location, but often they're actually missing a period of life, a chapter of their story. Maybe they miss being a child. Maybe they miss having fewer responsibilities. Maybe they miss spending more time with family. Home becomes a symbol of those memories.
And yet, even though homesickness can be difficult, I don't think it's entirely negative.
Really? Why do you say that?
Because homesickness reminds us that we've loved something deeply. It reminds us that certain places and people have mattered to us. If we never missed anything, it would probably mean those experiences weren't important. In a strange way, homesickness is evidence of meaningful connections.
I love that perspective. Instead of seeing homesickness as a weakness, we can see it as a reminder of what we value, the people we care about, the experiences we treasure, the places that helped shape who we are.
Exactly. And the good news is that today, staying connected is easier than ever. We can call family members, send messages, share photos, watch videos. Even if we're far away, there are many ways to maintain those connections. It's not the same as being there in person, of course, but it helps.
And sometimes, returning home after being away for a long time can be a very special experience. You see familiar places with fresh eyes. You appreciate things you once ignored. You realize how much you've grown. And sometimes you discover that home will always have a place in your heart, even if your life takes you somewhere else.
That's beautifully said, because I think that's the real lesson here. You don't have to choose between your hometown and your future. You can carry both with you. You can appreciate where you came from while continuing to explore where you're going. Those two things can exist together.
Before we move on, let's ask our listeners a question. Have you ever felt homesick? If so, what did you miss the most? Was it your family, your friends, the food, the culture, or simply the feeling of being home?
Think about your answer. And if you'd like, try answering in English, because in the final part of today's conversation, we're going to talk about a very interesting question. If you could introduce your hometown to a visitor from another country, what would you want them to experience first? What would you be proud to show them? And what makes your hometown unique? Let's explore that together.
As we come to the final part of today's conversation, I'd like to ask you a simple question. Imagine that a friend from another country is visiting your hometown for the very first time. You only have one day to show them around. Where would you take them? What would you want them to see? And perhaps more importantly, what would you want them to feel? I think that's a fascinating question because it reveals what we truly love about the places we come from.
I agree. And honestly, I don't think I'd start with the most famous tourist attraction. I know that might sound surprising. Of course, I'd want them to see the popular landmarks. But before that, I'd want them to experience everyday life. I'd want them to walk through the streets, visit a local market, try the food that local people actually eat, sit in a small cafe, and watch the world go by. Because sometimes the real character of a place isn't found in the famous attractions. It's found in ordinary moments. Speaker 128.
That's such a good point. When people travel, they're often looking for famous places, and there's nothing wrong with that. But some of the best travel memories come from simple experiences. A conversation with a local resident, a meal shared with friends, a quiet walk through a neighborhood. Those moments help us understand a place on a deeper level. They're often the moments we remember long after the trip is over.
Exactly. And food would definitely be a big part of the experience. I think every hometown has certain dishes that people feel proud of. Food tells a story. It reflects culture, history, and tradition. Whenever visitors try local food, they're not just tasting ingredients, they're experiencing a small part of the community's identity. And honestly, sharing food is one of the easiest ways to connect with people.
I couldn't agree more. Food brings people together, and it's often one of the first things people ask about when discussing a hometown. But beyond the food, I think I'd also want visitors to meet the people. Because people shape the atmosphere of a place. If the community is warm and welcoming, visitors remember that. If people are kind and helpful, visitors remember that too. Years later, they may forget the name of a building or a street, but they'll remember how people made them feel.
That's very true. And when I think about what makes my hometown unique, it's not necessarily one specific thing. It's the combination of many small things, the local traditions, the familiar sounds, the pace of life, the way people interact with each other. All of those details come together to create a feeling that can't be found anywhere else. Every hometown has its own personality, and that's what makes it special.
I love that idea. A hometown has a personality. Some places feel energetic and fast paced, others feel calm and peaceful. Some are famous for their history, others are known for their natural beauty. But no matter what kind of place it is, there's usually something that local residents feel proud of. And I think that's important. Being proud of where you come from doesn't mean believing it's perfect. It simply means appreciating the role it played in your life.
Exactly. Because every place has strengths and weaknesses. Every city, every town, every village. But our hometowns are special because they're part of our story. They shaped our experiences. They influenced who we became. And even if we choose to live somewhere else, those connections often remain.
After today's conversation, I think I've realized something. A hometown is more than a place we remember. It's a place that continues to influence us. The lessons we learned there, the people we met there, the memories we created there, they travel with us wherever we go.
That's beautifully said. And maybe that's why people enjoy talking about their hometowns so much. Because when we talk about home, we're really talking about ourselves, our experiences, our values, our memories, our journey. And that's something everyone can relate to.
Before we finish, let's leave our listeners with a challenge. Imagine someone asks you, "Tell me about your hometown." How would you answer? Could you describe it in English? Could you explain what makes it special? Could you share a favorite memory? Take a few moments after this episode and think about your answer. Maybe even write it down. Because the best way to improve your English is to talk about real experiences from your own life.
And we'd love to hear your answer. So here's today's question. What is the best thing about your hometown? Is it the people, the food, the culture, the scenery, or maybe a special memory? Write your answer in the comments below, and if possible, try writing it in English. Don't worry about mistakes. Just do your best. That's how learning happens.
And if you enjoyed today's conversation, please take a moment to support the channel. Give this video a like. It helps more English learners discover our content and become part of this community.
And if you're new to English Mind Journey, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We share new English conversation podcasts designed to help you improve your listening, vocabulary, speaking confidence, and natural communication skills.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Keep practicing English. keep exploring new ideas, and never stop being curious about the world around you.
We'll see you again in the next episode.
Take care, stay positive, and have a wonderful day.
Now, let's do a quick shadowing practice together. Listen carefully and repeat after us.
My hometown is a beautiful place.
My hometown is a beautiful place.
The people are friendly and welcoming.
The people are friendly and welcoming.
One of the best things about my hometown is the food.
One of the best things about my hometown is the food.
I have many wonderful memories there.
I have many wonderful memories there.
Even though my hometown has changed, it will always be special to me.
Even though my hometown has changed, it will always be special to me.
I'm proud of where I come from.
I'm proud of where I come from.
Thank you for practicing with us today.